All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for your flexibility. Sorry for the little bit of AV trouble. So my name is Eric Brechner. I am a principal development manager in the no longer existent Windows division. So as of a week, perhaps I should have updated my slides, but it really was a week and a half ago, and I don't know exactly how to describe the new situation that I'm in because it'll take about 6 months for that to work itself through the organization. But I now report it through Azure as of last week. So that's exciting. It's always exciting times at Microsoft. We often have reorgs. This is one of the bigger ones that I've been through in my 20 years there. So I have been at Microsoft for, 22, 23 years, something like that. I should figure it out. And it's a wonderful company. I've worked all over the company for Office and developer division and, all kinds of different places at the company. Most recently at Windows and Xbox. And I've been a huge proponent of agile methodologies for most of my career. Most recently, of course, for Kanban. I published a book a couple of years ago called, you want to hold it up, Jeremy? Look at that beautiful book, Agile Project Management with Kanban. Thank you so much. And look at this. It was a good book. High praise. Thank you. No, really, I'm very proud of it. It was fun writing it. I had a lot of help from a number of the people that are part of this community. So thank you for that. Anyway, I love Kanban, as I talk about in the book. And of course, I've tried to help Microsoft move more in that direction, both Agile in general and particularly toward Kanban. And so I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking to you about my experience doing that. And in particular, a lot of the things that didn't work rolling out for such a large organization, we'll get into that, as well as a bunch of things that did work quite well. So off we go. And it's called, just to give you a hint of what it's like, it's called Sisyphus, Windows, Xbox, and Lean. And yeah, that's me, Sisyphus. Okay, and Windows is the large rock. So, so just an overview, a little bit about the history of Lean at Microsoft, history of Windows and Xbox, for those of you who aren't familiar with the scale that we're talking about, the number of years entrenched in certain practices. I should just stand closer. Here we go. And then all about teaching this old dog new tricks, things that worked, didn't work, and then the strategy that we took and how Kanban really enables lean continuous delivery, which has been kind of the mantra that we've been pushing and I think is really taking hold. All right, so a little bit about lean at Microsoft. And if you're wondering, on the left, that's Bill Gates' original house. He's moved into a much fancier one since then. And that's the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on the right, which is absolutely gorgeous, their new building. Anyway, so the foundation on top of Bill's house for Lean at Microsoft is that from the very beginning, and this now goes back 30, 40 years, was feature teams. That was something that Microsoft had from the very start, that whole concept of working on a particular feature, particular part of a project together, and then switching up and working on the next thing. That's been there pretty much from the start. Strong customer focus has been there from the start, which is wonderful. I know it doesn't always show, but our customer segments have changed over the years, as you might imagine. Our original customers were people who would remove the backs off of computers and rewire them. Right? That was our original audience. And over time, obviously, we've had to adapt to a much broader audience. Continuous integration was always ingrained in the company, I think even before that concept existed. But Microsoft, from very early on, understood, it's a saying at the company, if you build it, it will ship. And then the converse is also true. If you don't build it, it's not going to. So continuous integration has been just in the mantra of the company from very early on. Quality control also has been in the company for an equally long time. Of course, that's tied to continuous integration. I will grant you products over the years. We've been doing better of recent, but certainly Microsoft had a history early on of having some challenges in some quality control areas. But in terms of it being a focus of the company, more so than a lot of other companies, it's been there from the beginning. And then agility of feature teams really was also a big part of Microsoft from the start. I know it doesn't kind of seem that way, especially as we got to be a huge company, but it is very much ingrained in the culture. That's not something that I and other people who really support Agile at the company have had to push. So that's a pretty solid foundation for aspects of Lean, which is wonderful, and again, long part of the culture. The big change going on at the company, and a lot of this is being pushed by our new CEO, relatively new CEO, Satya Nadella, but it was also being pushed just responding to our competition, responding to changes in our marketplace. And those big things are data-driven decision-making. These are all things we take for granted, but nonetheless, changes to a company that's 35, 40 years old. So data-driven decision-making, going from customer focus to customer obsession, and those two things are not the same. Continuous delivery as opposed to continuous integration, which also is a huge shift for Microsoft that originally shipped on those little floppy disks. I don't know how many of you, I'm aging myself. Of course, DevOps, absolutely critical to doing continuous delivery, and Kanban. And it's not necessarily in that order. I just wanted to finish with Kanban. All right, so that's kind of where we stand, both where we started and the changes that are rolling out throughout the company. And by the way, these things, the data-driven decision-making, customer obsession, continuous delivery, DevOps, and Kanban, they're going throughout the company. I'm not just talking about Windows and Xbox, but into Office and the actual Office apps, PowerPoint and Outlook. Those of you who use Office 365, notice that those apps change frequently these days. It's not like a big release anymore. It's just all of a sudden it says, hey, there's a new Office thing. And then the next time you launch Outlook or Excel, it tells you what's new about it. It's really remarkable the kind of change that's happening throughout the entire company, not just to our live services. All right, a little bit about Windows and Xbox, which are the two organizations that I've been the most part of over the last 8 or so years. So both of them go way back. For Windows, Windows 95, of course, came out in 1995. And that was the first major, obviously Windows 3.1 was the first, really usable windowing system that we released. But Windows 95 was the first one that went super broad. And of course, that dates back to 1995. Believe it or not, Xbox dates back almost as long. It was first set up with 4 people back in 1998. Obviously, that's not as big a release as Windows 95, but it's an old organization. And then the first Xbox came out in 2001, then 360 in 2005, and then Xbox One in 2013. And then, of course, XP, Windows 7, kind of following a similar sort of time frame, these releases happening. And then the big thing happened right about at the time that Xbox One was launching, which was that Windows and Xbox combined organizations along with this thing called Windows Phone, which I fondly recall. Anyway, all those organizations came together in 2013, which lasted 4 years that they were together, because they split up again in 2017. The thing to understand, though, about those things being combined is the number of people involved in these organizations. I mean, each one of these organizations is larger than most companies. So there are 2,000 plus engineers involved in the Xbox organization, which is a remarkable number of engineers, dwarfed by the 15,000 that are on the Windows division. And those are engineers. I'm not talking about the marketers and all that sort of thing. I'm talking about the engineers. There's a lot of engineers. And many of them have been around even longer than I have, and I'm 20 plus years in. And those engineers, they learned how to work a certain way, and for many of them, that's kind of how they like it. They're just used to it. They're comfortable with it. It's worked for them. They have been amply rewarded. If they've been around that long, they're living well. And so it's not like there's a lot of incentive that I can give them to say, oh, you should totally change. Right? So it's a huge challenge to change an organization of that size. So teaching an old dog new tricks. So 5 years ago, I know, isn't it cute? 5 years ago, I found it on the internet. So 5 years ago, Windows and Xbox both were feeling the need for speed. They really wanted to speed up how quickly they were releasing. Part of that is pressure from our competitors, whether it's the Android operating system for Chromebooks, whatever that might be, right on one side, or the PS4 and our friends in Nintendo competing with Xbox. It was really clear that both of them had to increase their cycle times. But the organizations are very different. Microsoft has a quite varied culture depending upon which product in which area you happen to be working on. And if you've worked at Microsoft, you can almost tell talking to a person for a few minutes which organization they're from. There's that classic diagram I'm sure many of you have seen about the Microsoft org chart, right? Yeah, so the Apple org chart was Steve Jobs in the middle and then everything's out at the edge. The Microsoft org chart was a standard org chart, but the orgs were pointing guns at each other, right? Which is not how it is today, but it certainly was at the time that that cartoon was made. That was very accurate at that time. And each of those organizations pointing guns at each other had very different, just very different cultures associated with them. I worked in Xbox for a number of years. Very progressive, very energetic organization. I adored working in Xbox. So they, when the challenge was there, okay, we got to get to continuous delivery. We just got to up our speed. I don't care that we're, building hardware. I don't care that we're, shipping operating systems that are based on Windows, which, was iterating once every 3 years, right? We got to go all the time. And within 2 years, they moved to continuous delivery. And that's not just Xbox Live, which Xbox Live has continuous deployment for much of their microservices. Continuous deployment, just to be clear about it, means that when they build, not just a local dev build, obviously, when they submit a build, they do their pull request, that goes off to a branch. That builds and deploys to production as part of the build. That is how they run, continuous deployment. Now, you don't deal with that. It goes to production, but it's a limited audience until it's been tested. But nonetheless, it goes straight out to production. So that's how Xbox Live works. But Xbox, the Windows operating system in Xbox, and it is a full version of Windows 10 that runs on the Xbox One. That operating system is built once or twice a day, depending upon how well it went the first time, and then deployed out to customers multiple times a week. And when we're getting close to shipping, every day, out to customers. Now, again, not all customers, of course. They're preview audiences. Not every customer wants to deal with an update, every day. But our preview audiences just eat it up. They want all the latest, greatest, cool stuff because they're the cool kids on the block with the latest features, right? So they get to show off, and they pay for that with having the system, update once a day. But that actually goes on, and then we go out to the entire customer base once a month for Xbox. And those changes, again, just on over 2 years. What a difference culture makes. Just super open. They've adopted Kanban, across that organization. Not every group. Again, there's different people. The people working on the kernel have a different point of view of the world than the people working on the apps. But for a large portion of the organization, they just rallied behind Kanban and DevOps and all those things. Windows, on the other hand, different animal, as depicted. Conservative, massive. I mean, Xbox is a big organization, but it's tiny compared to the rest of Windows. So they've moved, even Windows has now moved portions to continuous integration, continuous delivery over the course of about 3 years. So a bit longer, but still substantial portions of Windows are now delivered that way. And then the remaining portion are accelerating that direction. This is not something that people have dropped on the ground. It's hard, no doubt, very hard to move, and I'll be talking about that. But a lot of progress has been made. And so that's what I'm going to hit next is the things that worked and the things that didn't. Okay, so we'll go into that, and I'll be clear about what was able to move and what wasn't. All right, so I tried it, didn't care for it. So we've tried, I just gave 3 examples here. Of course, we tried a whole bunch of different things. These are 3 of the bigger examples. One of the things is the build system for Windows. The build system for Windows, you're not going to believe this. 24 hours to churn out a build. 24. And that's when it doesn't break, right, along the way, and it has to be restarted or have segments of it restarted. And the timeout on the machines to reclaim the machines from the cloud to do the next build, right, kind of kick in around 24 hours, as you might imagine, because we don't have enough machines. These are big boxes, by the way. When I say 24 hours, I'm talking about big, beefy, nasty lab machines with tons of RAM, tons of disk, SSD drives, the whole bit, right? Massive boxes, 4 of them to do 1 branch, because you have to do it for x86, ARM64, and D64. You have to do different architectures. So different machines for each architecture. Frickin' 24 hours. It's crazy, right? Absolutely insane. So that's a big old build. We needed to change that and be able to build a lot faster. So we said, all right, fine, and the VP in charge says, you guys go make that happen. I want 5-minute builds, which is absurd, but he's a BHAG, right? Big hairy ass skull. So yeah, let's go do it, right? So we swapped out that build system, total fail. You can't make changes that big for that large an organization and expect that to work. We really need to iterate through and do a step at a time. It's obvious. Obvious in hindsight for those people who made that decision. Obvious to some of us at the time, but that's okay. That's okay. Your role. I have to, disagree but commit. Okay. Anyway, well, what are you going to do, right? I love Microsoft. Sometimes it doesn't always go the way that I would have chosen, but then again, I'm not, I don't get to make all the decisions there by any stretch. So we advocated continuous delivery, just the concept of it, right? Let's keep getting faster. Let's keep getting faster. Okay? This is very scary to a lot of folks. People think about enterprise customers that don't want updates all the time. They think about all the validation that a lot of the larger companies that we serve, hospitals and stuff like that, go through before they'll accept new versions of the operating system. I'm sure if you've been to a hospital, you might notice like a Windows 7 or even a Windows XP logo on some of these systems. They're very careful about that sort of thing. So it's scary to go to continuous delivery. And all of the terminology associated with it just frighten the heck out of people. But if we use terminology that folks are a little more familiar with, then they're a little better about it. Oh, well, we're not going to do continuous delivery. We're just going to start flighting builds. We're going to do preview builds. We're going to do preview builds a little more often. Oh, that's not so scary. We could do that. Sure. Instead of, okay, we need short cycle times to get, feedback and all that. What? Like, oh, what's really valuable is how quickly we can get data back from a new idea. So there's this notion of idea to data that came up, or code to customer. These are metrics that we're now calculating to figure out from the time either someone came up with the idea or someone first did a check-in to the time that we actually get data back from customers as to whether or not that was a good idea. So we were pushing that, and everyone saw the value in that, even if they were a little frightened by the idea of continuous delivery. Like, okay, no, we don't need to ship it that often. Oh, but getting data back sooner, that sounds good. It's funny how just framing something makes a difference. And then the other big thing that we were doing was, okay, you know, constantly pushing on that cycle time. We wanted to get down to 1 month. That wasn't going to happen. We have settled on 6 months. And 6 months isn't great. You know, for Xbox, as you know, a lot faster than that. But it, you know, it's livable. You know, moving too fast wasn't working. People just react too harshly. It's too big an organization to turn like that. So having incremental steps of time to adjust makes a difference. All right. So it turns out you really can't teach old dogs new tricks. You can't. But this is the secret to the kinds of things, and I've already given you some examples, the kinds of things that did work. And that is varying old tricks, right? And then training the fleas. So who are the fleas? The fleas are the new folks, right? The college hires, the people who just transfer in, right? Those are the ones riding on the enormous organization, and they're a little, you know, they're quite a bit more agile. So that they're more open to doing things differently. All right, so varying the old tricks. So planning, you know, big planning for Windows. It's just a thing, and it's not going away anytime soon. We've shortened it. It used to be like a multi-year effort. It's down to a few months now. So it's definitely gotten shorter, but it's still a few months. We kept the planning. I mean, what are you going to do? I'm not going to have that battle with, you know, VPs and lots of them, enough to fill an auditorium, because that's where they have their planning reviews, in an auditorium with all those people. They're interesting. But nonetheless, right, you know, it's just a huge amount. So we keep the planning, but shorten the cycle. You know, just turn a little faster, but you can do your big planning. And the nice thing about that is the planners and all these big things that they're doing, having those short cycles, they're feeling the pain. They realize they need the short cycles, but they're feeling the pain of doing that much planning for those short cycles, and that's driving the right behavior, which is simplifying that planning, making it more iterative. We kept the features, right? Microsoft was just known for having these long feature lists, right? Apple, it's all like, ooh, cool, 1 or 2 things, and they put them in the commercials, and you're like, I got to get that, right? Whereas with Microsoft, it's the bullet list on the box, right? But that's just part of the Microsoft culture. We just have, everyone loves these features. But what we did was we reframed the features not to talk about, ooh, tell me the name of that feature, but tell me what the customer impact is of that feature. We started talking about things in terms of customer impact. So you could still do your feature, but when you talk to me about it, I don't want to hear the description. I want to hear the impact. We kept the telemetry. Microsoft has always had a ton of telemetry in its products, mostly just used for debugging purposes and things like that. Error logs, I don't know how many of you kind of dig into the error logs, but they're substantial on the machine, just tracking every little thing so we can debug issues when they come back from the field. The difference was now we're using them to make decisions. Before it was just for debugging. We already had the telemetry built in. Now we're enhancing that telemetry to tell us more about behavior, what people are doing when they're trying something and failing, when they're trying something and succeeding, which ways they like to use things. And a lot of our products have been redesigned based on that aggregated information. Obviously, we don't know what you specifically do, you know, on something, but we know in aggregate what people are doing with our products now. And we can design them to serve them better, which makes a huge difference. And then, of course, we kept the continuous integration, but we're adding on the continuous delivery. So each of these are just variations on a theme and not making it seem like we're changing the whole world. We're just changing it a little bit. And then training the fleas. So we've done a bunch of things for the young'uns when they join us. So Microsoft primarily hires college hires. We already have a lot of old folks, and what we need, we already have a lot of old folks, and what we need are lots of young people. And part of that is just to keep the organization vibrant. Part of that is such a large organization, you know, you're going to get old in a hurry if you're not constantly replenishing with new ideas, young folks, lots of energy. And another part of it is also we aspire to be a very diverse company. And for the longest time, as I'm sure you all know, you know, especially for computer engineering, has been dominated, at least in recent years, the last 20, 30 years, by men, completely inappropriate, and by and large white men, right? And that's not good, right? Our customer base, yeah, our customer base at one time, like I said, were people that were perhaps like that, okay? But that's not been the case for years. And we have to be much better about that sort of thing. It's something Satya cares about tremendously. And a great way to make that happen is to hire in talent, you know, when they're getting started and grow them into those positions and make them successful. So we hire a lot of college hires. And the college hires, they're far more willing to try stuff. They're obviously far more used to using open source and all that sort of thing, used to short cycles, used to using an IDE rather than command line. Believe me, there are a lot of people in Windows who do not want to touch an IDE. They want to work completely just on a console. Yeah. Anyway, so for these folks, getting them to adopt Kanban at the feature team level has been straightforward because it's cool. I'm not gonna hide this. Okay, when we put it out there, I'm like, oh yeah, you could use that Scrum stuff. That waterfall? What, like your grandpa? Oh no, you want the cool hotness of the Kanban. So, and then I of course talk about why it, you know, what the advantages are to that. Avoid being too preachy and inflexible about it. You know, what I tell people is there's no Kanban, you know, police that are roaming the halls ready to smack you around if you go one over your whip limit on a Thursday. You know, it's not like that, right? What this is all about is flow. What this is all about is delivering customer value smoothly, right? Working efficiently, catching issues early, delivering with quality, right? That's what it's about. You know, we're not going to be hard asses about this sort of thing. Give you a chance to kind of pick it up and figure it out. And that's been very helpful as well, because so many of these other things that have rolled out, it's all, you know, you must do this. And then we're also tying back Kanban to the planning. This turns out to be a very nice advantage of Kanban, by the way. I'm not sure if this has come up before in other sessions, but we have this overbearing planning thing going on, which I've mentioned before. And all that's in VSTS, which is a marvelous system that we overuse. And a lot of these, you know, frontline engineers, they don't want to mess with TFS, or VSTS, excuse me, now that it's online. They don't want to mess with that stuff. This is what a waste of their time. Right, all this, you bring it up as a web page, and you got to type in all this stuff. Oh, gosh. But they're perfectly happy to take a sticky and go, oh, yeah, that's right. I did it. Right? They're good with that. Okay? But, you know, so the beautiful thing is we plan in the big system only down to what we call the deliverable level, which you can think of as like a feature or major improvement, that kind of thing. Right? We only go down that far. And that goes into the backlog of the Kanban boards, and it gets broken down, right? We do the analysis, and we break it down into much smaller tasks, and those are the actual task cards that make their way through the chart. Right? But those little task cards, they're not in VSTS. So the frontline engineers, if they're using Kanban, they don't have to work in VSTS at all. Big plus. They love it. Everyone else is jealous. It's fantastic. Now, it annoys the higher up sometimes, but you ask them, well, do you want to see all the tasks? Like, no, I don't want to see all the tasks. Well, then what do you care where they are? Right? If you ever want to have a look, go move your butt and go look at the Kanban board. okay? But it's so easy for the engineers. They don't feel like they're wasting their time. So that's really great. Okay, so that's the Kanban piece. Very attractive for the new people, and for that matter, for all the people that they work with who want to seem cool, you know, to the college students, right? Of course, social pressure and all that. So Kanban has done really quite well in the company. I'm not saying everybody uses it or anything like that, but it's really it's grown quite quickly, which is wonderful. The other thing that we've done is for the newbies coming in, I don't want a 24-hour build. That's nuts. That does not sound good. And they want to be in Visual Studio coding or VS Code, coding the way that nature intended, you know, with beautiful IDE and IntelliSense and, you know, running and, you know, all visual, beautiful, right? That's how they want to work. That's how they've worked in college. That's how they want to work now. And so this whole thing where you're in this antiquated system written 30 years ago to build Windows, forget it. So they are highly motivated to refactor components so that those components only depend on a stable API, typically the Windows Platform SDK. So, or maybe the WDK for Windows drivers, okay? And if you can separate yourself out like that, well, we've got a system to support you. It's actually my team builds that system. It's based on VSTS, and we will automatically take last night's SDK. We will install it on some build agents. We'll put it on your build machine for you. It's all good to go. You work that day, work on your app or your component, whatever it is. It's nice and separable. You do your pull requests and whatnot. You get your rolling builds that take a few minutes instead of 24 hours. You get to debug it, whatever. When you're happy with it, or even automatically, it will redeploy it and shove it back into the operating system that builds that night so that everyone else gets it in the usual way. And yet you, for yourself, working on your component, have got that nice tight loop working the way that you know, people are used to back in college. So much, much, much better way to go. And then also encouraging people to reduce technical debt, switching teams to DevOps. The reason why I put down the technical debt is we've told teams, do not switch to DevOps before you've removed your technical debt, unless sleep is optional for you. So, but once they've taken care of their technical, you know, a lot of their technical debt, now they can actually switch to DevOps, which has a dramatic effect for these teams. Most teams quite frightened of this, especially if they're not used to being on shift or, you know, I don't know, taking care of their own bugs. Crazy. But nonetheless, once they get into it, they realize the value. Once they get into it, they realize that they can focus a lot more on the code and solving real customer problems than spending, you know, so much of their time fixing bugs and doing bug reports and everything like that. Because once you're doing DevOps, you are super motivated to keep your code at very high quality, because otherwise your life is miserable. But now you're in control of your life. So DevOps has been a hit once people get over the hump, start using it. And then driving to sub-day cycle times, which we now have for apps. We now have it for services. We now have it for things like drivers and other separable components. That's where we're at. And if you're wondering kind of where that's going, when I said everything's kind of accelerating more in this direction, is we are piece by piece componentizing and coming up with new API layers within the operating system, even if they're just used internally, just so that we can componentize and separate. And as we componentize and separate, you know, then each piece that we can break off, now that's on a super fast loop. So that's the direction the company's headed. Obviously, at some point or another, we're going to get down to, you know, a kernel that just needs to go as a block. But for those guys, they'll be perfectly happy with that. They live in hermit holes and, yeah, still use commands. Okay, yeah, some of them, yeah, it's amazing. Anyway, So for those people, they'll be fine. See, here's a quote that I just got a couple of weeks ago out of nowhere from someone that I loved. Because really, at the end of the day, Kanban fits so perfectly into this world. If really what you're trying to do is get to continuous delivery, which is what we are pushing, right? Then the idea of waiting 4 weeks for the end of your sprint before you ship is absurd. You know, you want to be able to ship that day if that's the day that you finish something, right? That afternoon, that morning, that evening, whatever it is, you want to be able to go out the door, right? You don't want to have to wait on other things happening or until you have the review meeting or whatever the heck it is, right? You just need to go. And Kanban fits that model to a T. In addition to it being cool and being lower cost and not having to mess with the VSTS, it actually enables continuous delivery. And I get this great quote: I understand Kanban and continuous delivery are not necessarily one and the same, but I think the continuous delivery workflow will help move more smoothly using the Kanban model. Just from a Windows dev lead. And they're writing to me like, right? I'm like, well, yeah. And here's $10. You know, I mean, I love it. But that's really what's kind of come through. And it makes me hopeful going forward. Certainly, any of the folks at the company that have moved to this model have loved it and don't want to go back. So I have great hopes for the future. And now, as you probably heard, you know, the big change. Now I'm in the Azure organization. The Azure organization is continuous delivery. They're not continuous deployment, but they are continuous delivery. And you know, they just know this stuff backwards and forwards, and that's the direction. All right. With that, questions?